Welcome, Jamie, to Metallian Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Horrendous, this new album, Ontological Mysterium, and more things relating to the metal world. So we are starting, I think, with a common question. How was band being the band during the last 5 years? Because your previous album, Idol, was released in 2018. And obviously, why you takes 5 years to release this new album?
I mean, part of it was the pandemic and lockdown. There was over a full year where we didn't see Damien at all. So that was definitely a problem. Because we started writing the record kind of right after Idol came out. And actually we had started recording before the pandemic happened. So we were like underway already. And then had to kind of stop for a year to a year and a half. And in that time frame, we kind of started to rethink and revisit some of the ideas that we had, and we actually made a lot of changes. And then, yeah, like after it was safe to be around people again, we got back to recording, and then, we just did it over a very long period of time. We would spend like a weekend recording, wait another month or two, and then do another weekend, and then it actually took Damien like almost a year to mix the album. There were a number of reasons for that too, so kind of every part of the process was just very drawn out. We didn't intend for that to be the case. That's just how it worked out.
Okay. Well, Ontological Mysterium is the second album that is released by Season of Mist, because you released your previous album, Idol, through them. So at the beginning, so how was the approach with Season of Mist? Because first you were with Dark Descent Records, with the last album, Anareta, and now you are releasing with these two albums with Season of Mist. So how was the approach to them? So how was who approached first, you or perhaps them?
We at that point we had been getting some offers from different labels, and a lot of them we just weren't really happy with, and we didn't think it was worth leaving Dark Descent. And we had a friend, Enrique, who is in Crypt Sermon and Daiva, and he at the time worked for Season of Mist. And we were just talking to him about the offers we were having, and we basically asked, is it okay? Or he asked us, like, do you want me to just ask Michael from Season of Mist if he'd have any interest? And we were like, yeah, sure, whatever. But it turns out Michael did have interest, and we just got to talking, and the deal that they were going to give us was better than what other labels were doing. And, getting to meet the team, they seemed like they would be very helpful. And we like that Season has a big European footprint, because I think a lot of Europeans didn't really have access to our stuff, our music, as easily over there. So for all those reasons, it kind of just came together, and we decided to go with them.
Okay. Nice to know. Well, other things about this new album, Ontological Mysterium, is that the band are crossing the path, I think, to when you start your career in the Chills, your first album was more death metal, old school death metal. Then, but the band changed over the years to this kind of progressive death metal. But now with this new Ontological Mysterium, I denote that the band has left the extreme area, and you put more progressive stuff into their music. So, and obviously for a lot of fans, a lot of reviewers, critics around the world, it's difficult to label the band now, because the people obviously attached with the past. Hey, the band play at the beginning death metal, then play progressive death metal, but now this very different way. So how do you describe the sound into this new ontological Mysterium? Is it still for you a death metal band, or perhaps you cross the barrier of the just the extreme area and just more progressive, more a lot of stuff?
I think I don't know if we know what we want to call it exactly. I think a lot of people still call us a death metal band or progressive or whatever. And I don't know. I think we're kind of fine with what other labels people want to put on us. I don't really call it anything specifically, just like if people ask me what kind of band I'm in, when I'm meeting them, I just like, oh, I'm in a metal band. And I kind of just let it be that, honestly. So yeah, I don't know if we have any kind of preference in terms of that. I think we tend to say death metal because that's what most people associate us with, but I don't know that we fit super well into the category in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people feel that way too.
Okay. Well, compared to the previous, talking about now the cover art, I think the only cover art of the album, well, that has something old and something peculiar, is the Chills, because it's all the stuff. The cover art is very classic at that time. But since the X disease, well, the band changed completely the cover art. Since there you decide to change completely as something abstract, because the only thing that I saw in the Exodus a skeleton there, and the second one like the skeleton too. And now with this aspect, obviously the skeleton or the skull is into the music, is into the cover art of the band. But like curious thing is that they always the cover arts a lot of abstract things. So what do you decide to change from the classical stuff to this abstract area into the cover arts? Are you think that is related with the music of the band?
Yeah, so I actually have to pause here really quick. I have to move rooms. Hopefully you can edit this out. I'll answer that question in 1 second. Hang on a second.
I can take this one. Yeah, I do think after the first record, I think all of us just kind of felt to a certain degree that we wanted to move away from kind of being more of like a sort of a band that's like an homage to the older style of the sound. And I think in a lot of ways, like we've kind of kept that mentality and that philosophy since then, where it's like we always want to do something new and something different, no matter where we are with any release. And I think that was, to me, the first moment where like the band really became what it is. And I think the artistic shift at that point, like we wanted the art to represent that shift as well, and kind of like music and philosophy and thoughts we were having. And we happened upon this guy, Brian Smith. I think Damien like actually just Googled like surreal art or something on the internet, and Brian Smith came up, and we just looked at some of his paintings and kind of like with a wing and a prayer sent an email to him. We're like, hey, we're in this band. We'd love for you to work with you. And he never really worked with bands before. And to my knowledge, I think he's only done one other thing for somebody. So it became this really cool tradition where like the art not only signals this change in our sound and this like movement forward, but also in a lot of ways, I think like kind of cemented our own aesthetic style and like visuals, which we've maintained. And I love that. That's another aspect of the band that kind of makes us stand out, where all the last 4 album covers anyway are like all the same.
Okay, well that is true, because for me now Horrendous has personal sound, very personal approach. Is very different from the album on a lot of bands in the world. That's why I'm a huge fan since the beginning to now. So, but how do you see now the evolution of the band compared to the Chills? I remember that the Chills is more old school death metal, but now the transition with the areas to this new ontological mysterium approach to the other kind of music. I think for me this is the way, a perfect evolution. If we are very curious since the beginning, but how do you describe this evolution in the band?
I think for me it's about, we always want to maintain kind of the core of where we came from. So we always want the ground level to be death metal, and I think it still is. I would say with each release, it's definitely diminishing a little bit. I think it's getting smaller and smaller, but I think just growing up and listening to bands play and listening to bands change, like we were always kind of disappointed when bands completely abandoned how they used to sound. And I think the people we would look up to in this case would of course be like Death, where every record is different, and yet like it still sounds like Death. And yeah, of course, Sound of Perseverance sounds way different than Scream Bloody Gore does, but I think there's this element that you can still tell that it's the same band and the same person making the music, and there's some type of core I don't know, core musical idea or sound that's there that they did maintain, even though a lot of the extraneous things and a lot of like the outside touches of the music did change. Um, so I think that's kind of where we're headed, where it's like we want to continuously expand the band's sound while maintaining that same core that is Horrendous. And I think as long as we feel like that core is still there, we are going to keep going further and further outside of things, you know.
Okay, and well, other for me, if I compare, well, the fifth albums from the five albums that you have, well, the Chills is two words, but if we take out the third, it's Chills. So then the second album is Ecdysis, the third album is Anareta, the fourth album is Idol, and now that's the first time that you use two words for an album name, Ontological Mysterium. And the curious thing too about this name is that you use a not common word in well to use an album, because ontological is very difficult to find. Hey, if you try to relate some good stuff from the old stuff, it's very left hand pad, wearing cross and growl. This is kind of stuff, or perhaps talking about the dead, grave, souls, Satan into the cover art or into the names. But ontological, who came with this word to put this album ontological, and why do you decide to put two words for this new album?
So I think in a way, a lot of our earlier titles were short, pretty intentionally. Because I do remember there being a trend at the time where a lot of titles for metal albums were like 3 or 4 words long. It was these really pretentious phrases that always kind of ended up sounding the same. I don't know, like incumbent darkness reigning over hell or something. I don't know. They're all like just really long ass phrases, and I think part of us wanted to go against that and make it short and sweet. The Chills, of course, just being like our version of the name of some old death metal record. And with Ecdysis and Anareta, I think there's this drive to make the titles a little odd, even though they're still short. The words that aren't typically used or seen, something that people would have to investigate a little bit and get into. And those titles very much reflected, I would say, like the philosophy and the music itself. So like both lyrically and musically, those titles referenced what was going on. And I think there's part of us that wanted people to be challenged and hopefully invited to investigate what those things were and like why that was the title, as opposed to just something that sounds cool. And if I recall on Idol, it was kind of taking a step back from that. We've been using this complicated shit. Let's do something simple this time, which was funny because it's almost the opposite of the music. Because I would say still that's kind of like our most complex album musically. And this new one, the spirit of the record so much felt to us like this rebellious stepping into ourselves, I think, and kind of embracing our own personalities and wackiness, both musically, lyrically, and otherwise. And the title just really felt like it fit that. It was something brazen and something outside of the box, something really odd, something that also just sounds cool and intriguing. But I think we ultimately felt like the pretentiousness of the title like matches the spirit of what we want in the music, and we're kind of daring to put that out there. Like, yes, this is what this is. We're gonna go there, and we went there. You know?
Okay. Well, other aspects about especially from old discography is that the only album that the only album of Horrendous has the logo is in the Chills. Since Ecdysis, you decide to take off the logo of the cover art and just put like a sticker into when I got my CDs. The logo is with the stickers over the jewel case, knowing to the cover art. So why did you decide to take off the cover art since the second album to now?
I think we just didn't want it to interfere with because the cover art's super complex and just really, really cool and beautiful. And I think we, having seen a lot of records where like bands have, these ridiculous logos that are like put over an already complex picture, and it just like at a certain point it looks silly a lot of the time, I think. And I think we got to a point where we were like, this picture is so cool, it just doesn't feel right to put our logo on top of it. It would, just be too much going on at once. So that's how we felt with Ectasis. And at that point, having done it once, it was a lot easier to just keep on doing it. And the same guy has done the art for us, and each iteration for these album art have been really cool and complex and everything. And we just decided this will just be our thing. Leave it off the cover. Let the cover speak for itself, and people can flip it over and see what the band is if they don't know on the back, right?
Yeah, I agreed with Jamie. I just think there's this element of like the reverence for the art too, and not distracting from it, and really making people take it in as its own artifact, as opposed to just being in connection with the band.
Okay. Other aspects. Well, since the second album, I told you that you decide to use a skeleton or a skull there, and then since there you decide to use this this is a common thing to your cover arts. So perhaps this skull or a skeleton has a name, perhaps a character name, like Eddie from Iron Maiden, like Cordul Exterminator from Voivod, etc. Perhaps this character has a name.
We hadn't really thought about that, but I guess we should come up with a name for to feign some continuity or something. That's an interesting point. No one's ever brought that up, but maybe we could come up with a name.
Okay. Well, now as you can now, well, for me it's impossible to say, hey, I prefer Neon Levitation over the Aurora Neurotica or over the Call of Shadow. It's impossible to say this. But the new generation has a retro movement to hear just singles, and now that's why the people are listening just doing playlists in Spotify, YouTube Music, even, and I think the algorithm are using just singles to recommend bands around the digital platforms. So if we relate this aspect for the new generation, so which single or which singles for you are the best way to understand this whole album or to capture the essence of this new album?
Well, I think that question was something we struggled with, because I think we personally feel like songs are all kind of different and none of them really give you a full picture of what the album's about. We had to choose singles to be released by Season of Mist as like preview tracks, and I think we went with the title track just because we figured a lot of people would find it surprising, but it has a lot of really catchy parts as well. And it also wasn't like an 8-minute track. It's a shorter song that people will probably just listen to the whole thing more likely than if we were to put on like Chrysopoeia, for example. I still think that was a good choice, but I don't know how representative it really is of the album. But alternatively, it's a hard time. We have a hard time picking songs, honestly. I don't know if Matt has any thoughts about what would be the best track.
Yeah, I definitely would. If I were to say like you'd only hear one song on this album, what would it be? I do think it would be Chrysopoeia, but again, it's too long. It's like 7.5 minutes, right? So how is this a single? And I do think that there's a big reason we didn't put that on there is because I think was this element of us wanting to save that as a surprise almost, where you're getting this record where you already love the singles, they're amazing, and kind of like the centerpiece of the album you still have no idea exists. So I think there's some impulse there to maybe looking back on like when we were buying records of bands that we loved that were coming out and wanting to have that surprise and wanting to feel that and not get the album and be like, oh man, I heard everything that's on here already, So I think it was a bit of both, but I do think as a song, to me, that seems to be like the mission statement of the album. Mm-hmm. Even though I wouldn't say that it has everything in there, but I think it's the closest.
Okay. Well, other thing that I mentioned is related to the singles is the name of the songs, because Chrysopoeia, this is a very difficult song to remember. It's very difficult to pronounce, but at the same time, it's a very easy to remember. Hey, what song is you catching up? Hey, Chrysopoeia from the Horrendous. Because it's very catchy, the name, and very curious name. Even Aurora Neurotica, the then Cult of Shadow, the Exogenesis. Who came with this kind of title for the songs to put this? Because it's curious. It's very uncommon names.
It's mostly whoever wrote the specific lyrics to the track. But we do get to a phase when once we have all the lyrics kind of put together where we'll look at the song titles and be like, are all of these like cool enough and interesting enough, and do they fit together well as like a puzzle when you're looking at, you know, the back track list on the album. But everyone kind of came up with some of the titles just usually based on, I think, whoever wrote the song. And I think we just do want to have memorable titles, even if they're difficult to pronounce words. Like you said, I think like Aurora Neoterica, I think that like a name like that sticks with you to a degree that, you know, a more simple title might not.
No, that is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
I love that Jamie brought that up, because we are people that obsess over these things to the degree that we do like write these down on paper and look at them, be like, oh, does this string of words look good in a row if this were the back of the album? Like we kind of do go that deep in terms of the detail that we're looking at, and that sometimes determines the title, because there are times where we kind of like vote, say we have 3 or 4 possible titles for a song, and I think sometimes the voting is swayed in that direction, because it's like, well, we know this song's called this and this one's called this, so which one also sounds the best in between those? But I think in terms of the process too, like sometimes it's just a line from the song. So like Neon Leviathan basically is in the song. But other times it's more of a summation maybe of the song as a whole. And everyone definitely goes out of their way to find the wackiest and most intriguing way of summing up what the song is about, I think. And every one of those titles does directly connect to what the song is about. So
okay. Well, I remember that I read in your history that you, Jamie, and Matt, about you are brothers. So, but also you found the band with Damien Herring, the other guitar and vocals, and you came from the same university, to create the band. So, how is the life when you start as a friends in university, college, etc., doing friends, and then decide to create this band, and even 14 years, you are 3 on the band now, and just Alex Kulik is entered in 2016. So how do you see this total history as a friendship in the band, etc.?
Well, I met Damien very early at university. I think within the first week, him and I were in the same year, and I could tell very early on that he was interested in heavy metal. And we kind of just stayed friends and would hang out occasionally. And Matt came to the same university a couple years later, and Matt and I wanted to keep we had music projects in the past together, and Matt and I wanted to just keep it going and maybe start a new project to keep us busy, for something to do and have fun with while we're at school. And we had jams with a couple different guitar players that just didn't work out. And then finally we played with Damien, and it felt good, and it was clearly going somewhere. And I think we just kind of ran with it. Pretty quickly we started playing the songs that developed into our demo, those 5 tracks. Like they were written within probably a month or 2 for the most part of us like starting to play together. So it came together pretty quick, and the 3 of us have just stayed good friends ever since. I mean, the band keeps us doing stuff together constantly, obviously. So we're, we see or talk quite often. But yeah, we've just been, I think part of the reason the band has survived so long and is because we are all just really good friends at the end of the day. And that goes for Alex too, after he joined.
Okay.
Yeah, the band's really just an excuse to hang out. So the music comes after.
Okay. Well, guys, we're talking about the promotion of this new album. What kind of plans do you have for this new album? Perhaps you will embark in tours in Europe, US, or perhaps, who knows, in Latin America, and a full tour for the first time here. or perhaps you will in upcoming videos. Who knows? Or perhaps you are already preparing new songs for the sixth album, so the sixth album from Horrendous. Who knows?
Yeah, we did a little bit of touring before the release in the US, and we're going to probably add some more US dates later in the year or early next year. We're kind of in very early stages about talking about getting to Europe next, probably like summer-ish, 2024. We would love to go to Latin America. We've never been down there, but that would be very, very cool.
Hey, if you know anybody, let us know.
Yeah, maybe we can talk
get us down there.
Talk to some connections, and we can make something happen because we would love to do it. But yeah, all of that stuff, and otherwise, I think we're feeling pretty inspired with the way everything has gone with this album, and frankly, have a lot of leftover ideas. So I think we're probably going to start working on the new one pretty quickly. It does take us a long time to complete albums, so even starting now, it's gonna take a while, but I think we'll probably just hop right into the next one, honestly, and keep the momentum going.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a magic in the air with this album right now that we want to capitalize on. So I felt really inspired to start writing in just because of how much response we've been getting on this one. And I think it's a good time to jump back into creative work when you're feeling this way. Because it really does just feel like I think we did take a risk on this album in a lot of ways. And now that we're seeing that it's paid off, I think we're just going to be even less careful as we make the next record, and less worried and less self-censoring, maybe. Because even on this record, I think there were moments where we were like, oh, have we gone too far here? Is this too much? And I'm looking forward to even more creative freedom on the next one, now that people have kind of given us the thumbs up. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, as I told you in the first question, we will talk about other kind of aspects. Just we spoke about the band, a little history, the cover arts, the lyrics, especially the curious names of the songs. But now talking about, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that now the digital platforms, etc. As you can see now, the music industry changed completely. It's not like the 80s or 90s, or when you decide to discover bands just by magazines or buying something record when you see the cover. I remember when I was in the 90s, I bought a magazine and I saw on a cover art. In this cover art, I liked the cover art and I bought the CD or bought the tape, etc. This kind of art is lost during the time. So, but now we have a different approach to the music. As I mentioned it, the algorithm now is more related to recommend all entertainment area, movies, music, taste, paintings, etc. So, and even with this aspect, I read an article about this aspect. The algorithm is taking the control over the taste of the human beings, and obviously are losing the battle and against the free will. This article mentioned this kind of aspect. So for you, how do you see this approach now? To the algorithm is recommended by just recommended for the people who pays more want to hear in the Spotify, etc. Do you think the algorithms take the control over the free will?
Matt, do you want to say something?
My computer was frozen for a second, so sorry. I was like, why isn't it working? I sadly do think that that's partly the case in a way. And I think part of the reason why, singles have been kind of the thing in pop music for decades now, but I do think that it's starting to happen in heavy metal music. And I think part of that reason too is also because there's just so much music out there now, and people's time to listen to music is getting smaller and smaller. So I think algorithms, playlists, whatever, all these things are just easier because people don't have to sit there like seeking everything out. It's made for you, you know. And if you're someone who's not a deep listener of heavy metal and doesn't really care about hearing full albums or like digging into that degree, and it's just like you love the aggression, you love the sound, you love the general feeling that you're getting from it. I do think that playlists are something that's just fun to explore, because it's also like back in the day, if you're trying to discover bands and even like making your own mixtape or something, like that's hours and hours of work and hours of research too. even like finding what the hell these bands are. So I do think in some ways, of course, it's wonderful because if you are trying to find new bands, I think getting these lists is takes a lot of effort and work out of things, and you can kind of just cycle through and be like, okay, I like this song, I like this song, I'm going to save these two, fuck the rest of them. But I do think it takes out an element of the joy of discovery. Like I have nowhere near the amount of fun discovering new music now than I did when I was young. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think number one, like it was just more exciting inherently maybe when I was like 12 to do these things. But I think there's this element of having to put in more work almost made it more rewarding. And when you do find there's rare bands that not a lot of people know about, and you're listening to them, it's like you're entering into this club or something. It's like secret club that you've somehow found. And I do think some of the magic is gone there for sure when it comes to digital music now.
Okay. I remember that I spoke last year with Devin Townsend. I spoke with Christopher from Therion, and also I spoke this year with Ray Edel for the Fates Warning, and all these artists told me that the prices to do a tour is more expensive than the old years, because now to rent a bus is more than $15,000. The flight tickets is too high. Even the venues in each city is too expensive now. So what is your point of view about this aspect, that now everything is changing because of obviously the pandemic and even the war?
Well, on our tour that we just did in July, expenses definitely seemed a much bigger problem than they had been in previous years. I mean, this was our first like bigger tour since the pandemic. But yeah, like the van rental was way more than it ever has been. Obviously gas prices are high, and etc. So we definitely felt that too a bit. Maybe less than some of the giant vans that are having these like massive tour buses. We're just in like a van basically. But I think it's palpable, and like we're lucky that we don't rely on this band for our income. Like we have other jobs. If we did rely on it for our income, I think it would be a bigger problem. But when we're touring, it's mostly just to have fun at the end of the day and to, try not to lose money, but we're not out to like make a bunch either, honestly. But I wonder about the future of touring. I think it might be a little bit changed if this kind of stuff continues.
Okay. And one of the last questions about one of the questions for this interview, I remember that I spoke last year with, obviously, Devin Townsend again mentioned this, that he creates music strange and weird. If we relate this kind of aspect with the Horrendous music, even this music for Horrendous is not for everybody. It's very personal music for you, because that's the way you create the music. But now that everything is very personal and there are more strange, technical, progressive, experimental, and I don't think avant-garde things and in many bands of the planet. So what do you think will happen to the next generation when listening to music that is very personal? Would you be taking about to close war up for the new bands? Because there will no longer a son of the radio, because they prefer to listen to more personal artists.
I don't know. I don't feel like experimental stuff is necessarily becoming more common personally. Maybe it is, but for us, I do think our new record, while being experimental in a lot of ways, I think tried to make it feel like it was more accessible in a way to people, like more immediately accessible. Like, I think Idol was a good example of what you're talking about, where like you had to really devote time to get into it, and for a lot of people it just didn't click because it's just really dense, and it asks a lot of the listener. And I think for the new one, we tried to keep a lot of that level of like technicality and stuff like that, but to make it more immediately fun and gripping to people, to pull them in more quickly. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, we're never going to be a terribly accessible band. We're making stuff that we want to hear, that at the end of the day, we are trying to do something a little different. And I don't know. I guess we don't have a lot of interest in trying to make stuff that's more broadly appealing, just because I think that stuff gets done a lot, and we don't want to do something that that's done commonly.
Yeah, I also think there's an aspect of, again, thinking of just the volume of music that's released now, where it's hard to I don't even know like what you would choose if there were like a heavy metal radio station that was popular. Even now, it's like, what the hell do I play? Because there's so many bands. And I think every subgenre of metal has gone so far at this point that I do think the music is becoming like more and more niche. It's like whatever your preferences are kind of lead you down this path to ultimately to these bands that aren't that well known because they're doing such like a laser focused thing with the sound. And I was thinking about this more broadly recently, just how I think culturally there just isn't as much of like shared bands or like shared songs period anymore. It's like, and again, I don't know if that's just because of the volume of bands that are out now or how many different branches of the sound there is, but I had this thought when we were on tour, and one of the clubs that we played in had this like mural of rock guitar players, basically everyone from like Jimi Hendrix and Prince to like Dimebag Darrell and Randy Rhoads and all these people, and I was thinking like, I think that way of life and that way of music and that way of culture is kind of gone, because I can't honestly think of anybody who would be added to that wall at this point. Like who is agreed upon enough as a whole in the music? And like, I would say someone like Tosin Abasi for sure should be on that wall, and I don't even love his music necessarily, but I think as a guitar player, for example, he's changed the instrument in ways that no one could even think of, but he's not going to be on that wall. And it was just this sobering thought of not having these touchstones anymore. Like there's not going to be another Metallica. There can't be. How could there be? And it's interesting because at the same time, there are bands, I'm sure, that like just as many people as listen to Metallica will listen to them, but because culture perhaps is moving in so many different directions, I don't know if they'll be seen as the way that Metallica is seen and kind of that reputation that they have. So it is interesting. I think music is in a way becoming more personal because there's just so much to find. There's so much to dig into, and it's almost like there just really can't be somebody to take up that much space anymore, I think, which is maybe a good thing.
Okay, well, guys, the sad times arrive at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one like me. I love this new record. I did a review. We put a 9 over 10 record. It's amazing. I did my pre-order. Really love the band since the beginning. Perhaps you want to add something to your Latin American fans and Metallerium followers?
Oh, well, certainly that we hope to get down and see some of you at some point. we never have. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to contact your local show promoters and send us some emails.
Tell them to hit us up.
We'd love to come down. We'd be there in a heartbeat. So
right.
But other than that, other than that, thank you for listening. Thanks for having us.